Hi guys, it's me, Kazar HD, and welcome tonight to the 2021 Spanish Grand Prix race preview. Of course, after qualifying earlier on, and you can see the running order that is going to be for the race. Of course, the starting grid for the race tomorrow. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully you've cooled down after qualifying earlier on, which was anticlimactic, definitely at the very end. I still think it was an exciting session though. Very surprising grid, definitely from 4th place down. So, of course, we'll get into that tonight. Get into the data, of course, the sector times and who was good where and how it all ended up, how it ended up. And, of course, we'll preview the teams and their performance tomorrow and what I think is likely to happen. And, yeah, we'll get into that in the next, say, 45 minutes to an hour. And, yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well, no matter what part of the world you're in, no matter what time it is. Hopefully you are having a good Saturday or what could be Sunday morning if you are in Australia or that part of the world. But if you are unsure as to the exact qualifying results, you can see them down the left hand side, but I'll put them on screen with the lap times. So Lewis Hamilton earlier on got his 100th pole position in Formula 1. What an achievement. I never thought 100 pole positions would ever happen. Never thought it'd happen. Lewis Hamilton has gone and done it, and he's going to get even more pole positions and probably end up with, being well into the early 100s for pole positions. Might even get towards 150 by the end of his career. What an achievement for Lewis Hamilton. Max Verstappen was only 300ths of a second behind Lewis Hamilton in 2nd place. Valtteri Bottas 3rd, Charles Leclerc 4th. What a result for him. 5th, Esteban Ocon. 6th, Carlos Sainz. 7th, Daniel Ricciardo. 8th, Sergio Perez. Very poor for Sergio Perez, and I think he's going to struggle a lot tomorrow, if I'm going to be honest. 9th, Lando Norris. 10th, Fernando Alonso. And then outside the top 10, Stroll, Gasly, Vettel, Giovinazzi, Russell, Tsunoda, Raikkonen, Schumacher, and then Latifi and Mazepin at the very back of the grid. But we'll first get into, of course, Mercedes. And again, great achievement for Lewis Hamilton. 100 pole positions. And yet again, today, just like he did in the race in Portugal, proved why he is, for me, the best. And why I still think he will end up world champion this season. And it's going to take everything a Max Verstappen and Red Bull have to beat him, because Verstappen in Q2 put in a great lap, quarter of a second clear. Bottas even looked a tad quicker than Hamilton through the early part of qualifying. But then, again, when we get to Q3, when it really matters most, Lewis Hamilton banged in an absolute incredible lap to just about get ahead of Max Verstappen, who was looking insanely quick today in a Red Bull car that we'll get into in a moment. I don't actually think the Red Bull was as quick as, let's say, as Max Verstappen was showing, I think, today. I think Verstappen really did overperform with the car he has at this track today. But yeah, again, when it mattered most, banged in a great lap. And because of the track condition, by the end of for the final run of Q3, because the track condition was poor, Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas just simply couldn't show, any real improvement at all to get over Lewis Hamilton's lap time and to get on pole position. Pole position here, of course, is so important. If you look at the history of pole position to race wins at this circuit, you've really done, 75-8% of the job in terms of winning the race in qualifying if you do start on pole. So Hamilton, really, if he gets the start, tomorrow that he needs, which is him maintaining 1st place, then I honestly don't see how he won't win the race. I mean, there is a chance at the pit stops, if Max Verstappen is close enough, that Max could do an undercut. There is a chance of that, but realistically, if Lewis Hamilton leads at the end of the 1st lap, is anyone really going to stop him in this form? Well, he's still at an insane level. So yeah, I just don't see The only way Verstappen, and we'll get into it in a moment, the only way Verstappen, I think, really is going to win the race tomorrow is if he does get into the lead by turn 1 on the opening lap. If he doesn't do that, then I just don't see how he gets past unless Hamilton has some kind of problem with his car or makes a mistake, which is very rare. Of course, made one at Imola, but that was the first one of in, well, quite a while, let's be honest. But yeah, Mercedes and Hamilton looking great. Valtteri Bottas will be disappointed not to have got pole, I think, because, again, in Q2 was looking very, very quick. And, of course, has pole position, or has had, rather, pole position here in the past. So, yeah, Bottas would have been disappointed. And third place is still not that bad of a place to start from, because, I mean, he will get, as long as he gets a good initial getaway, he'll get the slipstream immediately off of his teammate. So he'll get a good run down to turn 1. And really, I'd say his aim is to get ahead of Max Verstappen on that first lap, which would seal the deal in terms of a race win for Mercedes. If they were to have a 1-2 at the end of the first lap, then I just don't see how Max Verstappen could possibly win then. So yeah, Bottas still has a chance of a good race result, but as we'll get into in a moment with the sector times, Mercedes, even though it was a close run thing, in the, say, Sector 2, Sector 3, where, you know, the aerodynamics is, of course, most important in those parts of the track, Mercedes were quicker by about a tenth of a second over those 2 sectors. So, really, tomorrow, like I said, if they do have the lead of the race at the end of the first lap, Mercedes, it's going to be very hard for Max Verstappen to keep up. It really is. He's going to have to make sure he stays within DRS if he's going to have any chance of an undercut. If he can't do that, then I just don't see how he can keep up with Mercedes, who aren't dominantly quick, but they are still at the top of Formula 1 in terms of pure performance. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. For Red Bull, though, I think good result with Max Verstappen. Could have been better, though. So he'll be disappointed he couldn't get pole and couldn't improve on that final run. But at the end of the day, second place for them, considering where Mercedes looked as though they were on Friday, is probably a decent result at the very least for them. But I would honestly say for them it's a good result, because, you know, at the start of the race, it puts them in a great position great position to get the lead off of Lewis Hamilton, which you can definitely do if he gets an initial good getaway. I mean, the Red Bull has the straight line speed. The Honda is definitely really going along well, as has been shown by the first sector times for the Honda-powered teams. So, yeah, the start is so crucial tomorrow, as I just said. If Verstappen doesn't get the lead at the end of the first lap, I don't see how he wins the race. I just don't see it. It would take a masterful undercut, an amazing strategy, or luck. That's really the only way I see him winning, other than getting the lead at the end of lap 1. If he does get the lead at the end of lap 1, then I wouldn't say it's necessarily all over, because I do actually think the Mercedes car is quicker on race pace. Not massively, probably 0.2 of a second at most between the Mercedes and Red Bull, and in Mercedes' favour, I believe. So it wouldn't be, you know, the race wouldn't be over, but I really just think the start of the race tomorrow is really the race itself in terms of the fight for victory. In terms of the other positions, you know, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th, that will go on for the whole race. But in terms of the fight for victory, because it's so close between the, you know, top 2 drivers and the 2 teams, even though I think Mercedes will probably have a couple tenths in hand over Red Bull tomorrow, that's still pretty close over the course of a Grand Prix to be, you know, lapping within each other. So because it was so close, I just don't see one driver making that much ground on the other. If, you know, let's say at the end of the first lap, Max Verstappen leads by a second from Lewis Hamilton. I mean, Hamilton will have definitely the car still to win the race, but because of how close the lap times are going to be, I don't see him really making anything up on track, and it's going to, again, come down to just great pit stops and stuff like that. So, yeah, in terms of the battle for victory, it really does come down to the first corner on the first lap, and I cannot wait to see what happens in tomorrow's Grand Prix. For Sergio Perez, very, very poor. Very, very poor. We'll get into with the sector times in a minute, just how, he really lost out compared to his teammate and where he really lost out. I mean, Perez has not performed well today. He really hasn't. And I said this, I think, in practice 3 or my qualifying stream, that it's hard to say how good Perez is going to be around this track, because historically, I mean, he's had a couple good results here, but historically, most of the time, it's not been that good. He's always ended up, when he's been in the midfield, he's always ended up, most of the time outside the top 10 with his starting position. So this is not exactly qualifying-wise a proper Sergio Perez track. I think Monaco is definitely a lot more of a Sergio Perez track, definitely in the race. So, to be honest, not a massive surprise that Perez has ended up not qualifying in 4th place. A bit of a surprise, though, that he ended up so far back in P8 behind both Ferraris, an Alpine and a McLaren, and to be honest, was quite lucky to outqualify Lando Norris in the other McLaren, because Norris really looked as though, until the end of qualifying, that he was going to outqualify his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. So, yeah, Perez, very poor. And yeah, we'll get into in a moment the sector times and where he really lost out. But even though he was poor, Perez, I think it also, another reason why Sergio Perez was not good today, I think, is because, like I said with Verstappen overperforming, I don't actually think the Red Bull car was that quick today. And I don't actually think the Red Bull car in general, compared to the Mercedes car this weekend, is that quick compared to the Mercedes. And I do think, again, Verstappen is massively overperforming, considering how Red Bull, the Red Bull in Sergio Perez's hands has looked. So I don't think Perez's performance is necessarily all down to just him. I think it's, say, half the car, half him. And again, we'll get into that soon enough. Let's now get into the top 2 midfield teams. McLaren first. P7 and P9. That's a pretty decent result. Couldn't have really asked for any more. I guess the biggest disappointment I can think of is, again, Lando Norris, the man on screen, ending up behind his teammate Daniel Ricciardo by a couple positions. Very surprising. And I got to say, with the way Lando Norris has started this season, it's so surprising that Daniel Ricciardo currently has a 3-1 lead over Norris in the qualifying battles, because it seemed to us like Norris has hammered Ricciardo, and he has in the races. He absolutely has. But in qualifying, Norris just can't quite, when it comes to Q3, just can't quite get it done. Kind of a bit like Max Verstappen at times so far this season. In qualifying, can't quite get it done, but in the race tends to, let's say, correct that. And McLaren are definitely quicker here than I thought they were going to be. Let me just mute my mic so I can cough a bit. My throat is very sore. Right, there you go. Yeah, McLaren, a bit quicker than I thought they were going to be this weekend. And I think for the race tomorrow, considering their race pace as of normal, they're probably going to finish around about where they are, P7, P8. I can't really see any massive gains from McLaren. I think they could probably get a car into the top. Well, they've got a good chance of a top 6 finish, but really the car or the team, or I guess both, that's going to hamper that is Sergio Perez and the Red Bull, because I think Perez will, climb up from 8th place. what I think will happen with Perez is, let's say he stays in 8th place. What I think will happen is Perez will do what he did in Portugal and go a lot longer into the race before he makes his first pit stop. And then I think Perez will come into the pits. And then hopefully by then, because of the extra speed the Red Bull will have, he should then jump at least 2 or 3 cars in that fight there, because I'm sure the midfield rivals he'll be racing against are probably going to get held up in traffic behind the people outside the top 10 who have started on, say, the medium or the hard compound tyre. So it's going to be hard to see McLaren getting right up there with, say, Leclerc, Ocon, to be honest. And I think, let's say Sergio Perez has a really bad race, then honestly, about where they've qualified for McLaren is where I think they're going to finish. A top 6 finish, though, is definitely possible. It just requires, I think, very opportunistic driving, I'd say, on the first lap from either Ricciardo or Lando Norris. So we'll have to see. But they're not completely cut adrift, say, from teams like Ferrari, because as we've seen, and we'll get into them now, Ferrari today they were good. They could have been better. Carlos Sainz could have been on, in P5 instead of P6, and I think Carlos will be I think he will be disappointed with that, because of course now starting in 6th place, he's also like Charles Leclerc, starting on the dirty side of the grid, which is not good, obviously, especially around a track like this. So yeah, not good for him there. But really, mostly, I think you'd have to say this is Ferrari's, I guess, them just, executing the qualifying pace that they do have around this type of circuit. We knew they were going to be around 4th, 5th, and 6th. The only reason Charles Leclerc's 4th, really, is because Perez is having a bit of a struggle in the Red Bull. So that does help a lot. But yeah, Ferrari, good qualifying. Again, could have been better. The only thing for the race is that, they should, in theory, finish at the front of that midfield pack in the race. But because of their tyre wear issues that they've had, they had last year, the year before, and they've had so far this season, where they have to pit a bit earlier than other cars, because they do tend to wear the tyres out a bit more than other teams do. That might upset them tomorrow, because as we know, this circuit is a real punisher of tyres. So they're going to have to really hope that the pack behind are not right on their tail, because if they are, that they might fall back with at least one of their cars. They don't have the advantage either of starting on the medium compound tyre with any of their drivers. So, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a tough race tomorrow, but they still, in theory, should have a car quick enough to get a double points finish, a strong-ish double points finish for the Ferrari team. And really, if Perez doesn't get up to 4th place, Ferrari, their aim has got to be 4th and 5th, really, because McLaren are clearly behind them this weekend. And, in Portugal, Ferrari were clearly quicker, but ended up still scoring less points than McLaren did. So, to be fair, they can't really afford tomorrow to be outscored again by McLaren. We've got to do the business tomorrow, because, they're only a few points behind. Is it 11 points, I think it is, between the two teams? So, yeah, if Ferrari can get 4th and 5th, that's 22 points. And then McLaren, they're going to struggle to get anywhere close to that. So they've really got to put a dent into McLaren's lead over them. Obviously, Esteban Ocon in the Alpine will be a bit of a wild card there in the pack. It's hard to say. We'll get on with Ocon later in terms of where I think he'll end up and how his race will go. But at the minute, I have to say it's hard to say what is going to happen with Alpine, because I think a lot of that depends on the pace of the McLarens behind, who do normally have very strong race pace, but it's just, how strong will that race pace be by McLaren? It's hard to say. But yeah, Ferrari, their aim has got to be 4th and 5th. They've got the pace for it, but can they look after their tyres enough and get the pit stop strategies right? We'll have to see in the race. They're probably going to be pitting because of their lack of good tyre management, I guess you could say. I'd say Ferrari are probably going to pit around lap 20 from the soft compound tyre. If they go as long as I think they will, the soft compound tyre and the mediums and the hard tyre and so on and so forth. Mediums tomorrow, if you're starting on the mediums from outside the top 10, you should be going to like lap 33 or lap 34, really, on that compound, and then pitting just one more time to go to the end of the race. But if you're starting on the soft tyre and you're starting inside the top 10, you should be pitting around, the Ferraris are probably going to pit around lap 20-ish because of their extra bad tyre wear. But really, I'd say, especially if you've got good enough track position, if you can get to lap 25 on the soft compound tyre and really look after them, then that will really help your race results. So, of course, that'll be a big factor tomorrow. But before I come to you guys in the chat, let me just get into the sector times, as my throat really does hurt quite a lot. So here are the sector times, and we'll now get into who's of interest in this sector time list and why things ended up the way they did. So in Sector 1, you can see Daniel Ricciardo recorded the fastest Sector 1 time. Lando Norris was up in 6th place. Sebastian Vettel was in 5th place. I think you can clearly see the Mercedes-powered teams very quick in that first sector, which is not necessarily because of the power unit. I'm just noting that it's the Mercedes-powered teams who are, up in that top 10 a lot. Also, the 2 Alfa Romeos were very quick in the first sector, which is really interesting because the Ferrari power unit is still not that powerful, not as powerful as they really want it to be compared to the Honda or Mercedes. So very impressive that you've got 2 Alfa Romeos up there ahead of the Alpines. But if we look at Sector 2 and Sector 3, you can really see what I mean by Mercedes have about 1/10 of a second over Red Bull in the 2nd and 3rd sector. So in Sector 2, Hamilton was about 0.2 of a second quicker than Max Verstappen. And then in Sector 3, Max was about 1/10 quicker. So, you can do the maths. So if Hamilton's 0.2 quicker in the 2nd sector and Verstappen's just 1/10 quicker in Sector 3, then that's where I'm getting my 1/10 of a second gap between the two in the aerodynamic, say, sections of the circuit. So that's what really helped, I think, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton today. And as you can see, Mercedes won 2 in Sector 2. Those medium speed corners, Mercedes were very strong. But if we look at Sergio Perez, Sector 1, Perez is, about 1/10 of a second behind Verstappen just in Sector 1 alone. So you can see there, Perez was just struggling, really, all day long with his car. Because Sector 1 is literally the pit straight, Turn 1, and then after that, you're just accelerating all the way until, Turn 4. So it's not as if you've got loads of tricky sections of track. It's not that hard for F1 drivers, I'm saying. For us mere mortals, it's incredibly hard, but you know what I mean. And again, he was already 1/10, at the very least, down on Verstappen there. So you can clearly see Perez just did not put in a good performance today. But in Sector 2, Perez was about 1/4 of a second down on his teammate. And then in the final sector, he was 0.4 of a second slower than Max Verstappen. So that's about 3/4 of a second, the gap between his teammate and himself. So yeah, Perez really having a struggle. I do think, again, Verstappen overperformed today, and I do think Mercedes, aerodynamically speaking, like Portugal, again, in the aerodynamic parts of the track, the grippy parts of the track where you do need a lot of grip to really excel, Mercedes do have the better car overall compared to Red Bull. I think we can see that. Ferrari then are the best of the rest. You can see Leclerc and Sainz right up there in Sector 2 and Sector 3. Leclerc and Sainz are not quite on par with Mercedes and Red Bull, which I think is interesting to note in the second and third sector, because if you go back to Imola or even Portugal, Ferrari were actually kind of on par with them. But this track this weekend, they're about a tenth of a second down at best on those front two teams. So yeah, Ferrari still looking good, but they're not quite as good in those parts of the track as I thought they would be. So not great, but I mean still very good considering last season, of course. And then in Sector 2 and Sector 3, also McLaren looking, I mean the Sector 2 McLaren clearly ahead of the Alpines, but then you can see in Sector 3, and I was talking about this from Portugal, but the Alpine was so quick in Sector 3 in Portugal, I think because of the very slow two final corners you have before the large acceleration zone as they run up to the start-finish line. See in the third sector here in Spain, where you have the slowest corners, Ocon behind Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas, Leclerc, Sainz, only 4 thousandths of a second down on Carlos Sainz through the middle, through the final sector. So you can clearly see there, the Alpine and the slow speed corners is very, very strong, which will really benefit them well in Monaco. Because of course, really from the end of Sector 1, you have quite a lot of slow corners, which, you know, you have to have a car that's bang on the money in those corners, or else you're going to be miles away from where you should be. So I'm expecting Alpine in Monaco to be pretty quick. And then, yeah, McLaren, in the faster stuff, the faster sectors, the faster corners, McLaren are better, but not as great as maybe you would hope. I mean, of course, in Sector 1, they are quicker than Ferrari, which is not a surprise because that is the most, let's say, power unit hungry, or power hungry rather, part of the sector of the track. So not a surprise McLaren is so quick there. But in Sector 2, where it's still a bit quick, you can see they're still up there, but not quite there with Ferrari, who are about a tenth and a half, 2 tenths quicker. And then, the third and final sector, Ferrari are about 2 tenths of a second quicker than the McLarens. So without doubt, Ferrari have a much faster car in the second and third sector compared to McLaren. I'd say in the second and third sector, Ferrari are probably about half a second at most quicker than the McLarens. Because though Ferrari's poor tyre wear, that will not be as big, that gap, tomorrow. And then, yeah, after those teams, I will say as well, something of big interest is the sector times of Pierre Gasly and AlphaTauri in general. Because in Sector 1, I mean, Gasly, of course, qualified in 12th place. In Sector 1, Gasly and Tsunoda, 17th and 18th. But then you look in Sector 2 and Sector 3, Gasly's in the top 10 in those sectors. Gasly in Sector 2 today was up in, 7th place, and he qualified 12th. And in Sector 3, he was up in, 9th or 10th place, but again, qualified in 12th. But because he was so slow, or the AlphaTauri rather, was so slow in Sector 1, they couldn't bring it back, if you know what I mean. They couldn't reverse that time they were giving away. I mean, they were giving away to McLaren, 2.5, 3 tenths of a second alone just in Sector 1, which is so much lap time to be giving away. And then, I mean, in Sector 2, Gasly was faster than both McLarens, and then in Sector 3, he was just as quick. So, for AlphaTauri, I don't know why, but the first sector, they were alarmingly slow. I don't think that's all to do with the power unit. I think what that might be is one of two things. Either one, they've gone for a very aero-heavy setup, or they or, to protect tyres or something like that. Or they've gone for a very aero-heavy setup because they think it's going to rain, because there is actually a possibility of rain tomorrow. So that might be why AlphaTauri have gone for such a draggy car with setup, because that's the only thing that can explain why AlphaTauri are miles behind they're even behind in the first sector. They're even behind Mick Schumacher by half a tenth or even a tenth of a second. See what I mean? It's very, very alarming if that's not down to setup, I have to say. And then, in Sector 2, Sector 3, for the other teams, you've got Aston Martin, say, ahead of Alfa Romeo. And then, Alpine looking, obviously, a lot better in the more aerodynamic, heavy parts of the track. And especially when we get into the slower corners, like Sector 3, you can see the Alpine looking very strong, clearly ahead of teams like Aston Martin, McLaren, AlphaTauri as well. So, the Alpine in the slower corners, very, very strong. But there's your sector time analysis from the qualifying today. I will say it's very good to do this because it gives us a much, much, much better indication as to what's going to happen in the race tomorrow, and gives us, vital knowledge. Because, in the race tomorrow, if we didn't go through this, we wouldn't be as educated on what was going to happen, again, if we didn't do this. And definitely in the midfield tomorrow, if you notice that the AlphaTauri is really slow compared to another car of DRS, then you can give credit to me or us through going through these sector times and proving that the AlphaTauris are nowhere in Sector 1, and that's why they have been so poor today. But we'll go back to that picture quickly of the Ferrari. Let me find some comments here from you guys. Etienne Stevens says first corner will decide Max or Lewis for the race victory. Yep, I absolutely agree, as I've said. Hello everyone, by the way, in the chat. And good morning, Brazil, says Claudio Rodriguez. R says great lads from Ocon and Charles Leclerc, absolutely. KG says, I heard Perez is feeling ill. Well, if that's the reason, then that's completely understandable, because if you're not at full health in a Formula 1 car, you're going to be losing performance without doubt, and quite a lot. I don't know if that's real, though, that news, so I'm going to hold off on, talking about that, unless, it does get confirmed that Perez actually has a problem. Daniel asks, didn't Perez claim a shoulder injury? I'll be honest, I haven't seen anything about that, but if he does have a shoulder injury, then that would explain why he was so slow today. Because again, 0.4 of a second slower than your teammate in 25 seconds of sector around this circuit. That is that's really poor. Really, really poor. Let's be honest there. Andre says, first, the corner does not decide, but pit stops, Red Bull is faster than Merc. I'm going to guess you've not got much experience of watching the Spanish Grand Prix, because normally the race is decided, in terms of victory, it's decided at the first corner. In terms of the battle for the midfield positions, that normally does, like I said, go on all race long. But in terms of the race victory, it's normally decided at the first corner, I'm afraid. And this track really is, it can be at times very similar to Monaco. Even though Monaco, of course, is a better track, more exciting of a racetrack to watch the cars. And I will be honest, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's race, but I am looking forward a lot more to Monaco, because I think the gaps between the cars will be a lot shorter, and the field obviously will be a lot closer. And I think because of the pace of the this car on screen, and because of this man on screen, it being his home Grand Prix, I think we could see Leclerc up there fighting for pole position in Monaco. Because again, the driver makes a lot of difference around a track like Monte Carlo. So I would say I'm looking forward to that Grand Prix more so than I was looking forward to this weekend's Grand Prix. But we've been proven wrong in the past when it comes to races in Spain. We've had very interesting and sometimes even exciting races in Spain. So I'm completely leaving open that possibility that we're going to get that tomorrow. But until we see that, we'll have to see. But really, I think tomorrow will be really a chess game, but really in the entire field, and it will come down, especially in the midfield, to pit stops and pit strategy. And then for the race lead again, I think it will just come down to who leads at the end of the first lap. Let me read one final comment, and then we'll get on to the rest of the order here. Daniel also says, the dreaded curse of the yellow camera at Red Bull. Absolutely. But I will say that Sergio Perez, I think, has had a good season so far. I think once he gets a properly good result in a race, a podium, that would be the properly good result. I think that will give him the confidence then to kick on and be a bit more consistent rather than a bit all over the place. And also, it doesn't help when the field behind Red Bull Mercedes is still not that far away. So if Perez does have a weekend like this, he's always at very high risk of not qualifying where he should. Henry O'Boyle, 2016 and 2017 were both not decided on that first lap. Everything after that has. True. But look at the races before 2016 and 2017. 2015 decided at the first corner. 2014 decided at the first corner. 2010 decided at the first corner. 2008, 2007, 2006, 2005, 2004. Not 2004. 2003. The list goes on. And I've watched, by the way, not live, a lot of the races I have watched back on because I obviously, like I've said many times before, I've only been watching Formula 1 for about 10 years, so I can't say I watched the 2007 Spanish Grand Prix or anything, but if you go and look at, say, every Grand Prix at this track, I'd say 75-80% of the time, the race, in terms of who wins, is decided at turn 1. So, yeah. I just don't see, if Hamilton is leading at the end of the first lap, then I just don't see how Max Verstappen wins. I hope, I really hope we do get a battle, because one thing that's been great so far this season is Max and Lewis have gone wheel to wheel at every race so far. So, that would be great if that happened. But let's be realistic. It's not going to, is it? Unless we get a bit of a mental race, which around this circuit is not actually that likely. So, yeah. Mika, do you expect any overtakes tomorrow? I do, but I think they're only going to be DRS overtakes, to be honest. And what a DRS overtake is, if you don't know, is an overtake that was completed clearly and only because of someone having DRS rather than genuinely being, in a natural position to be overtaking, like we used to have, of course, pre-2011. So yeah, the only overtakes we're going to get tomorrow is going to just be DRS overtakes. Maybe we'll get one or two actual real non-overtake DRS overtakes, but yeah, that's what the Grand Prix is going to be tomorrow. Again, though, I'm hoping it can be a lot better than I'm saying. Right, let's read one final comment, then we'll get on to the rest of the field. Brooksfoot asks, do you think Ferrari will have the confidence to try and get through Q2 on the mediums anytime soon? Well, they tried in Portugal and it did work with Leclerc, obviously. And I mean, did it really work in the race? That's what I'm thinking. Did it actually work in the race? It kind of did, but maybe not as much as, because of Ferrari's tyre wear, I guess you'd call woes. It's hard to say whether it worked really as much as it could. But it depends on two things. One, the pace of the Ferrari at a certain Grand Prix, but it also does depend a lot on the development of the Ferrari car this season. If the Ferrari car does develop over the season, of course, because of the new rule that they have more wind tunnel time this season because they finished lower in the constructors last season compared to teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren. They will have more time to develop if they want to. If they can develop the car and be in the last, say, few races in a position where they separate themselves from the midfield and become I guess what you would call a front-running team, then probably then they'll start to, go for that strategy. Because it's no doubt that is a better strategy than, starting on the soft compound tyres. Because, of course, soft compound tyres do tend to go away a lot quicker than the mediums do. So I reckon they probably will get into that position, but it won't be until quite a bit later in the season, I'm going to be honest. And then I'll just answer this final question from Chris Wharton, who asks, if they got rid of the final chicane, do you think there'd be more overtakes? Not really. No, not really. Look at when we did have the old two fast right-handers before we had that final chicane. Of course, back then we didn't have DRS, but could they really follow closely then? Not really. So, yeah, I'd say pretty much no. The part of the track that really prevents these cars from following is the final sector. And I'd say most importantly, it's turn 10, 11, 12, and 13. Those are the corners that really make it hard for another car behind to follow closely. And then, get close enough where they can actually make an overtake work down the straight. Of course, the final chicane is a bit, brutal as well. If you do go in a bit too hot in the dirty air, you can, of course, lose plenty of time. But it's really, again, turn 10, 11, 12, 13, I think, that really hurts, because especially when your tyres are a bit worn, when you're going through those long old corners, it can really be quite hard to keep up in those corners with the car ahead. At least in the slower corners, you can gain in the Constantina effect, so it can maybe create the illusion that you are closer, but sometimes you can actually, depending on the corner, if it's a slow corner, you can actually gain a couple tenths, especially if you're a driver that does break a bit later than others in races. But yeah, those medium speed corners that you get and that we've got on this track, again, like the exit of turn 10 into 11 and 12 and then 13, it's just very, very hard to overtake because of those corners, really. Anyway, let's go on, I think, to the rest of the teams. So, Aston Martin next. Aston Martin 11th and 13th. Can't really argue too much with their result. It's probably the best it was going to be. They're not as quick as Ferrari. They're not as quick as McLaren. They're not as quick as Alpine. They can't really do anything about that right now, and they're not going to do anything about it, really, until probably Baku at the, at the earliest. That's probably the earliest Grand Prix track where I think Aston Martin can realistically compete with those teams. So yeah, 11th and 13th is, I think, a good result considering what type of car they have for this year. I will say, though, I do think they will get a point tomorrow because of where they're starting. I do stress, though, a point. That is all they will get in the race tomorrow. So yeah, I think because, they're going to start on probably the medium compound tyres, and Aston Martin so far this season have actually had pretty decent race pace. So Aston Martin should be definitely figuring strongly at the end of the race in that battle for, say, 9th, 10th, 11th. Yeah, I think Aston Martin will nick a point. Again, though, only a point. I don't see them getting into the top 9. because I just think anyone ahead of that is just going to be too good for them. They'll have to hope for some retirements probably for that to happen. But yeah, if they can nick a point, at least they're, still grabbing something from these races where they're just not that quick. I mean, Monaco, I don't expect them in qualifying, really, there to be that quick. I think in the race, they could probably grab something if there's a bit of chaos, or if they capitalize really well on a virtual safety car or safety car period, they could end up getting, say, 8th or 9th place at a Grand Prix like that. But again, until we get to a race like Baku, where their car will be definitely a lot better suited to a track like that, I can't sit here and pretend that Aston Martin are actually going to be a dark horse or, anything like that. They just don't quite have the car to be anything like that at the moment. But I think tomorrow, again, they'll nick a point because they have both drivers in good positions, probably on good tyres, and both drivers are, of course, good race drivers. So I think they'll be decent tomorrow, considering the pace of their car. AlphaTauri next, and as I said a moment ago, the Sector 1 abysmal performance by the AlphaTauri team is what cost them in the Grand Prix today, in qualifying today. Now, again, I don't know if they're trying to protect their tyres by, having having a lot more wing on their car, which I'm going to guess is why they're so slow in Sector 1. I can't imagine it's down to power, because the Red Bull cars, of course, with the same power unit, look absolutely fine in that part of the track. So I have got to assume it's either because they want to protect tyres, or they think it's going to rain tomorrow, which, of course, if it rains tomorrow, then it's a completely different race with a completely different complexion. And if it does rain tomorrow, they'll be thanking their lucky stars, because they will then come in handy with the package they have. Because, again, second and third sector, they were just as quick, if not quicker, than McLaren were. But because they were so abysmal in Sector 1, there was just no way AlphaTauri were going to have a serious damaging effect in the race or in qualifying today on teams like McLaren, Ferrari, and Alpine. So it's a shame, and really, AlphaTauri, they need to be praying and doing many rain dances if that is true, that they've gone for a wet setup. They need to be doing plenty of rain dances and really pray to the gods, because if not, then I just don't really see how they're going to make any progress tomorrow. I just don't see it at all. Next up, Alpine. Great result for them. P5 for Esteban Ocon. What a result. Fernando Alonso 10th. Not that good, to be honest, for Fernando. At least it's a Q3 appearance, though. That's something, I guess. But yeah, Esteban Ocon up in 5th place and looking like a serious contender, I have to say, for a good result in the Grand Prix. And I think really 5th and 6th is where he's going to end up finishing, because the Alpine, well, and we saw from Portugal, it's a good race car. It's got the pace over a Grand Prix distance to still feature in that part of the grid. So don't think that Ocon is just going to fall back and not really be anywhere, because I think he will be right up there again in 5th and 6th place with drivers like Sainz and Ricciardo. And yeah, because of, how good this car is aerodynamically, and especially in that final sector, I think Alpine really are going to be in a good position in the race tomorrow. I think they can get a few points of Esteban Ocon. Fernando Alonso, I think, is probably going to end up finishing outside the points, really, because he's not as quick in that Alpine as he should be, and he's under threat, of course, massively from the drivers behind, who are going to start on the fresher and probably better compounds of tyre behind him. So he is under threat there. But for Esteban Ocon, I think he's in for another good result. And if he can grab another 10 or 8 points for the Alpine team, then without doubt, Alpine are clearly moving ahead of teams like AlphaTauri and Aston Martin in the battle in the Constructors' Championship. And finally, we'll go on to Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo 14th and 17th, that's about where I thought they would be. Kimi Raikkonen, I've got to say, was really poor. And you know what? I'm going to bring up the sector times again because I actually noticed something when I was setting the stream up. Kimi Raikkonen's sector times in the second and third sector were horrific. Absolutely horrific. So in sector 1, Alfa Romeo are actually really quick, which I'm guessing that's because they've set the car up to be a bit more slippery, I guess. Because I don't think their car is especially that special in fast corners, so I don't think it's that. But then, yeah, in sector 2 and sector 3, Kimi Raikkonen in sector 2 is behind Mick Schumacher in the Haas by almost a tenth. And then look in sector 3, he's behind both Williams's and Mick Schumacher. I don't understand why he was so slow. He's raced here so many times. How is he that slow in those sectors? And look at, compared to Giovinazzi in the second sector, 0.3 of a second just in the second sector. And then in the third sector, it's another, say, 2.5 of a second. So in the parts of the circuit where, you require a lot of grip and also a lot of confidence, Raikkonen half a second down alone in those parts of the track. I cannot explain why. But he was so incredibly shit in those parts of the track. And yeah, tomorrow, Raikkonen's not going to finish in the points, is he? Neither is Giovinazzi. So yeah, Alfa Romeo in a really poor position. But Raikkonen, seemingly with no confidence whatsoever in the Alfa Romeo. And the Alfa Romeo seemingly having a very tricky time of it. And then finally, gone to Williams. And yeah, Williams 15th and 19th. Latifi will be disappointed to be out-qualified by Mick Schumacher. But Williams don't have that quick of a car. They really don't. Russell has done so well to get into Q2 because that Williams was really not that special at all around this circuit. So another great job there by George Russell. But yeah, Williams, they're not going to finish in the points either. It's going to be them, Alfa Romeo, really racing around each other, I think, in the race. And hopefully Mick Schumacher can get in there as well. But that is, guys, basically it for this stream. But before I go, let me just read off some final comments from you guys, if I can, and then we'll get to the end of the stream. Samarth, your views, or asks what my views are on Jahan Deruvala. He's a decent driver. I don't think he'll be an F1 driver, but he's a decent driver. It's hard to, I will say though, when it comes to F2, it's not exactly easy to say who is absolutely going to make Formula 1. There are drivers with a lot of potential and a lot of talent, but again, it's not exactly easy to say this one is going to make it, this one's going to make it. Very closely, very close-knit battle in those series. Let me see if I can find some other comments here to finish on. Chris Wharton saying Ocon a standout today. He's been performing well this season. Really has, and hopefully he will continue that going forward. But I think I'm going to come to the end of the stream, guys. Thank you very much for coming along to this race preview for the 2021 Spanish Grand Prix. And don't forget, guys, to subscribe to the channel. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or go to my homepage and do it there and hit the notifications bell, because I will be live at 1:30 p.m. UK time tomorrow, me and Nib, for the race watch along for the 2021 Spanish Grand Prix. If it does rain, then make sure to tune in, especially for that. But tune in anyway, even if it is dry, because you never know what can happen in Formula 1. Something mental does tend to happen sometimes. So, again, make sure to tune in for the Grand Prix tomorrow. As well, don't forget to like this video. Comment down below as well your predictions for tomorrow. Who you think will finish when, who, performed well today, and who you think will do well tomorrow, let me know in the comment section down below. Again, don't forget to smash the like button. Don't forget to share this video and channel everywhere you can. And as well, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. We have almost 500 people in that server. So if you want to join that server and be part of the growing Chazza HD community, then make sure to join that. And it's also a great place for notifications for my videos and streams. So again, don't forget to join the Discord server. Link below in the description. I'm sure Rooksfoot is putting links in the chat as well. So if you want to click on those, you can as well. But guys, until the race watch along tomorrow, again, 1:30 p.m. UK time for the 2021 Spanish Grand Prix, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.